this next session is pretty special because we always try to choose someone that is kind of, we use the word luminary, but illuminizing some part of retirement, technology and retirement, technology for those that are aging. And had a wonderful conversation earlier this year about what Dr. Warren is doing. And what was most exciting to me was that he hit all these different points that I'd like to think about when planning a session. And one being having reinvented retirement. And we talk about, I don't know if retirement these days is 55 years old, but or 65 years old. But at 59, he started eHarmony, and not only that, has used technology to transform the way people meet and fall in love. And so I think it hits so many other points beside that, and I don't want to take too much other away than let me introduce the moderator for this session, Dakila Davina, who's the executive editor for Everyday Health, and his motto is, it's actually inspired from Steve Jobs. If today were the last day of your life, would you want to do what you are about to do today?
That's a good one, Dakila. So the answer to the question is yes for me. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Neil Clark Warren. Dr. Warren is a clinical psychologist with a PhD from Chicago, University of Chicago, and is the author of 8 books on marriage, relationships, emotional health, and has spent 35 years counseling thousands of married couples with their relationship issues, or as you'd like to say in the past, presiding over the funerals of marriages, which I found really interesting. And you've also served as the Dean of Fuller Theological Seminary School of Psychology from 1975 to 1982, before launching eHarmony in 2000. eHarmony, just a little bit of background, has more than 44 million members and more than 500,000 members who have gotten married through the service. There's 452 eHarmony members who get married every day, which I suspect is slightly higher than the number of folks who get married at the little white chapel down the block. But eHarmony has really revolutionized the online dating industry with your proprietary compatibility algorithm. But I think the most important factoid here is that Dr. Warren has been married to his wife, Marilyn, who I had a pleasure to meet, who's sitting here in the front row, for 54 years. Yes. So Dr. Warren clearly knows a thing or two about love. So some of the most successful online CEOs, were in their mid-30s when they launched their companies. Let me just run a list of a few of these. Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn was 36. Larry Page of Google, 38. Reed Hastings from Netflix was 37. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg, when Facebook went public, was an infant at age 27. Dr. Neil Clark Warren here was 65 when he launched eHarmony. So if you had launched eHarmony at age 35 as opposed to 65, in what ways do you think the company would be different?
Well, first of all, I think it would have been a total failure because I didn't know the first thing about how to make marriage work when I was 35. I remember one time at the University of Chicago hearing them say that a physical scientist tends to peak at about age 30, and a social scientist tends to peak at about age 60. So I waited till I was 65 to start this company, I think beyond my peak. And at any rate, I don't think at 35 I would have known enough about the extremely complex, severely underestimated challenges of finding one person with whom you could spend the whole rest of your life. I wouldn't have had any idea about how hard that is, and I wouldn't have known how to do it. So it wouldn't have worked.
So I think it's safe to say it wouldn't be as successful as it is today.
Oh my gosh, no, I mean, what I learned between 35 and 65 was most of what I know. You know, up to 35, I was just trying desperately to make people think that I knew enough to get them to come back for the next session.
Right.
And by the time I got to be 65, I actually knew enough to help people find their way through this very complex maze of relating on all aspects of life.
So after 7 years of leading the company from founding it to really building it to success, you decided to retire. And 2 years later, you decided to come back.
Yeah.
And now you are taking eHarmony to the next level and expanding it to different aspects of relationships and being able to connect with people. What did retirement teach you in those years that you were away?
Well, I think retirement is vastly overrated. For me, it was the most boring thing I had ever encountered in my entire life. I will never do it again. I will never again retire unless I'm forced to by somebody, and then I'll find something to do that will give me a purpose for living. We sold 30% of the company to Sequoia and to TCV, and we had enough money to live for the rest of our lives, and we thought we'll just go back to Kennebunkport, Maine, and we'll buy us a place, and we'll build the mansion of our dreams, which we did, and it wasn't very long until we started feeling bored with what was going on, and the company started getting into trouble because it started trying to do things that it didn't know how to do. There wasn't a single person left who had ever done any psychotherapy with people. Fortunately, we had some great people like Steve Carter, Dr. Steve Carter, who's here today to kind of guide something of the company, but frankly, he didn't have the power at that time to do what the company needed to do to make marriage really work. And when the company started degrading a bit in terms of its growth, I started thinking to myself, could I do something different? And I went to the person who was very active on the board and said, would you ever let me come back as CEO? And he basically said, you're 78 years old. How could that happen? I said, Warren Buffett is 84 years old, and he seems to be doing okay. And I named about 5 other people who are over 80 who are still doing well. And he said, if you think you have it in you, come on back. And so I came back a year and a half ago, and we've grown 45% in the last year, and we feel really good about it. I would never retire again.
I think that's fantastic. So, the world of online dating has changed quite a bit since you started in 2000. Obviously, eHarmony doesn't compete with dating apps like Tinder, where it's geared to a younger audience. You're just looking for a hookup. You're really going to eHarmony because you're looking for a long-term relationship.
Yeah.
But there are other dating sites out there now, like OurTime.com, and the AARP, I understand, has their own dating site that speaks directly to the boomer audience as well as seniors. And that's really what we've been talking about all day, is how do you message that group? So be curious to find out, how is eHarmony reaching the baby boomer and senior market?
Well, we just finished a major study that some of you may have read about. I think we got about 200 articles on it, where 20,000 people were selected at random who were married, and we asked them, each one of them, where did you meet your partner? And they met their partner every place, lots of different places. About 750 of them met their partner at eHarmony. But it was a random study of America. We were delighted to know that the people who meet on our site were actually younger than people who meet in other sites. We thought our site was for the old fogies who were just waiting to be serious, but didn't want to have to do it for too long. We found that they were actually younger and they were more successful than people who met in any other way. And so when we got that whole message back about all the ways the eHarmony matches meet and how well they do, and they do better than anybody else. You can see it in the great science journal where the article appeared. You can see that our people really do well on chemistry. They really do well on getting one another. They do well on durability, how long they last, and so forth. Now, I have to tell you that I'm 79 years old now, and so I just forgot one thing, and that was exactly the precise nature of that last question. But I have an answer for it if you just give me the question once more.
So how is eHarmony reaching the baby boomer?
Okay, how's it reaching the baby boomer?
Yeah, how are you messaging?
Well, first of all, we've spent $1 billion. We hit $1 billion about a month ago in advertising. So that's one of the ways that we...
And you're front and center of that advertising.
Well...
for most of it.
As little of it as possible. But yes, I'm trying to demonstrate to the world that we're trustworthy. We've got 7 full-time psychologists who work for us on the matching. Yeah. And those algorithms are really extremely complex. And we want to try to demonstrate that in our ads, that we do that. And here's the great thing with the baby boomers or with anybody else, nobody else that I know of any of the companies that you've mentioned, have done the kind of research that we've done, both clinical research and experimental research, in trying to find out what are the secrets for making a marriage last for a lifetime. Marriages that don't last for a lifetime encounter a lot of complexity, and you're trying to merge families and all that kind of thing. We want marriages that last for a lifetime. And the way that we've gone about trying to get that to happen is we've done a tremendous amount. Well, we did 40 years of clinical research, and we've done a lot of empirical research. And so I think that's how we're trying to reach the baby boomers, is to let them know we have really researched this like nobody else has ever researched it. Our divorce rate for the first 5 years of marriage is 3.8%. And so that's way lower than the divorce rate. The divorce rate for our biggest competitor, there are 1,500 sites that advertise. There are only 2 sites that are really big. And for our next competitor, the divorce rate is 3 times as high in that 5 years. So we try to reach the baby boomers by saying, logically, here's what we can do for you. Here's how we've prepared to help you find the secrets to making your marriage last for a lifetime.
So we heard a lot from Terry's presentation about the demographics of the aging population, how that's changing. 10,000 baby boomers turning 65 every day. What, in your opinion, are the biggest issues that the aging population faces? And how can technology, and it doesn't need to be eHarmony, or it can just be online, how can technology help solve those problems, or that problem?
The first thing, if I can say this, most people think they're going to die by the time they're as old as I am. Well, that's not true anymore. You're going to live for a long time. My dad lived to be 93. He never went through a single scan that I know of. My mom lived to be 88. I expect to live to be over 100. I expect my wife to live to be over 100. They're going to live a lot longer. So prepare to live a lot longer. We have, on eHarmony's current rolls, we have 88,000 people who are over 80. And of those people, a lot of them are getting married. On our Rose Bowl float that we just had last week, we had a couple that was 83. They're both 83 years old. And I promise you, sharp as tacks. And these people who are over 80 are no longer kind of senile and you know, ready for the rest home and that kind of thing. They should be preparing for a much longer lifespan. So that's the first way that we can help them. The second way that we can help them is we can get them to look directly at the challenges of being older and what they have to do to kind of encounter those challenges. But they've got to get more optimistic. We've got to help them get more optimistic. My brain, in my opinion, is more efficient right now than it's ever been in my lifetime. And everybody's brain can be more efficient as you go along. And the more you stay working, the more likely it is your brain is going to stay efficient.
So you were going back to the idea of the topic of divorce. You had talked about eHarmony not as being a technology company, but really a social sciences company that uses technology to help connect people and use those relationships. And talked about eHarmony as sort of a social revolution, taking divorce away. Now, going back to the baby boomer population, there are more people, baby boomers, who are getting divorced today than are widowed. And so my question is, do you feel like you're accomplishing your mission?
Well, we do feel like we're accomplishing our mission. I mean, think how much worse it would be if we weren't doing what we're doing. The fact is, the world has become much more complex. When my folks got married, and in 1915, my dad was 19 years old, my mother was 17 years old. They ended up being married for 70 years. The country was a very simple country to be married in. I mean, nobody got divorced. But between 1945 and 1985, the divorce rate in America went up 300%. It's really hard now. It's really complex. I mean, you got all the agricultural part of America moving to the high population centers. And when they moved away from the extended family, they started relying a lot more on marriage. And a lot of those marriages just couldn't carry the weight of being everything. So we did our research on 500 married people. And we had 4 groups of 200 couples in each of the 4 groups. And one group was just fabulously married. I mean, they were just so happy with their marriage. All the way down to a group that was just horribly disappointed that they'd ever married each other. And so we started looking at the differences between the fabulously married people and the terribly disappointed people. We found 29 variables that discriminated between those groups. So we reasoned that if from the very beginning we could put people together who would end up in the high group or had a much greater likelihood of ending up in a high group, you'd done something really important. I didn't want to do this. I'd spent my whole life counseling with people who were trying to make their marriages work, but it was very difficult. But I finally came to the conclusion that most of the marriages that fail were in deep trouble the day they started because the people weren't well matched. They didn't have a chance of making that marriage work. So that's the first thing that I would say is that we got to start with people from the word go, and people have got to recognize that it's very complex being married to a person over time, and you better have broad-based compatibility. Broad-based compatibility, because if you don't, before you know it, you'll be a part of the 75%. 75% of marriages in America don't work. And the reason is because people have never been tutored to understand what all the complexities are of making a marriage work.
So you've used, so eHarmony has really distinguished itself from the online dating marketplace through your proprietary algorithm.
Right.
Being able to match people through the information. So you've accumulated tons of data. and use that data to really find the perfect match for somebody. I read that you had started a new service, a new premium service called EH Plus, I believe,
Yeah.
that allows people, subscribers, to have a dating coach,
Yeah.
a relationship coach.
You're right.
How does that fit into the algorithm model that's really set you apart from the competition?
Well, here's the biggest problem that we have in America. We have so many people in America who are single, but there are only 5 million people at any given time are on all the dating sites combined. So if you have 120 million people who are single, only 5 million people are on a dating site. You realize that hundreds, really, of millions of people have given up on trying to find the right site. So we say, here's what we think most people want. They want a companion. They want somebody to help them with this process of finding the right marriage partner. So we said, well, how about this? I mean, let's just start with me, for instance. What if I said to you, let's say you're 55 years old and you're a little bit shy, let's say, and you would like to get on a dating site, but you don't quite know. How about if I take you on as your companion and I help you find the right person for you? And I do all of this after exploring at a very deep level who you are and the kind of person that we think you need in order to end up in that high group. What if I did that? And we talked after every date you had. And we said, well, how did you like that one? How did that work out? What seemed to be the problem, and so forth. By the way, there's a movie out now called The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And it's Ben Stiller who's done this phenomenal movie. And it's really all about eHarmony. 13 times he talks about eHarmony on that movie. And he has a dating coach on that movie who works with him, and it's a moving movie. We've seen it 5 times. My wife still cries after she sees it because it's so meaningful that he has somebody to talk to after he has every date. And we say, turn your computer off. Don't do this stuff anymore of trying to figure all that out. Let us do it for you. Now, it's expensive to do that. We charge $5,000 a year for that. And that's called EH Plus. And it's growing much faster than we ever expected it to grow. Because if you think about, it's the biggest thing that anybody could ever do for you to help you find that perfect person. And that's what happens to Ben Stiller in that movie. He finds the perfect person. So I'm excited about that. But here's what I worry about. $5,000 is a lot of money for a lot of people. And we've got to somehow find a way to make that more affordable for people. On the other hand, if you look at a lot of things that people are spending money for, they're spending a lot more than $5,000. If we could virtually guarantee that you're going to have a high-functioning dating coach, counselor to talk to you every day if you need to until you find the perfect person. And you know what? We have 740,000 people right now who are actively engaged on our site, paid up to date, 740,000. And we'll get you that right person. We'll overcome your shyness. We'll set it up so that there is no rejection for you on the first date. And you'll have a chance to kind of show who you are. That's what EH Plus is about.
Fantastic. Before we wrap this up, more and more Americans are starting businesses later in life. According to data from the Kaufman Foundation, the highest rate of entrepreneurship in the U.S. is shifted to the 55 to 64 age group. So what's your advice to other late in life entrepreneurs?
Oh, I love that question. You know I love that question because you and I have talked about it. I say don't stop working until you want to. until you're not enjoying it anymore. But look, here's been the problem. People haven't gotten into the right job, so they want to retire as early as they can because they're not happy with the right job. So right now, we've got a team of people, and Dr. Steve Carter, who's here, is leading that team to match individuals with jobs. If people can get into the right job, they're not going to want to retire. Why would they want to retire? They're just kind of hitting their stride, and they're enjoying it. And as soon as we get this work through so that you get into a job and it just matches your personality, it's exactly what you want to do, you won't want to retire. And that's what we want to say to people all over the country. Don't give up work. It's your mission. It's what you're here on earth for. You're not here on earth to hit a 5-iron into a sand trap and then into the water and then out of bounds. I mean, you know, and try to get a little bit better every day doing something like golf. You're here trying to help yourself and other people live a more vital and more meaningful life. And so we would encourage them not to get into the right job and then stay in it as long as they want to.
What other aspects of relations? So you're thinking of pairing employees and potential employers and vice versa. What other aspects of relations are you looking to expand on as you take eHarmony to the next level?
The biggest single problem we have, Dakila, the biggest single problem we have in America is that you only have about 4 or 5% consciousness of what's going on in your brain. And the best book that I've ever read is a book by David Brooks called The Social Animal. That book just absolutely changed everything about my thinking. You've got 95% of what's going on in your brain out of consciousness. You're not aware of it. It's probably running a lot of the decision-making machinery, but when you're not conscious of it, you can't take advantage of it nearly so effectively. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to work out a way of you are the only person who has access to your thoughts and feelings. We're trying to find a way to do the job of getting you to ask all the right questions so that you build a body of knowledge about yourself that will make every decision you make much more likely to work. And the only way we know to do that is to use artificial intelligence. So we're starting to use artificial intelligence. We're hoping to make that a very big part of our next 5 years.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for your time here, and it was a pleasure to meet you.
It's a pleasure to meet you too, Dakila.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.